Hello guys, and welcome to another episode of MTG Steam Brewery. This is the Blue-Red Delver deck that you guys will see in the first video. Hopefully this goes up beforehand. Make no promises on that. But if you're watching this now, then please enjoy. We're not going to do deck tech over the other one, because we've already done one over it. Though it did go up really weird, it went up sideways. I don't understand what happened there, but it is up there if you guys wish to go see it. But for this is my Blue-Red Delver deck, so let's go and get into it. We have 4 Delver Secrets. Our main threat, I like to play with sleeved up selection cards, I guess is what they're called, where it just picks them. For those of you who don't know what Delver does, at the beginning of our upkeep, if the top card's in a sorcery, we may reveal it. We look at it first. If you do, he becomes a 3/2 flyer, and he's basically a 1 blue 3/2 flyer, as we only run 11 creatures, 20 lands. So 29 cards in our deck will flip Delver. So he's very likely to flip after turn 1, because we'll only have 50 cards left in our deck if we're on the play, 52 if we're on the draw. So he's very likely to flip. So we have 29 cards to flip. And we have Warring Pyromancer, a lot better in Modern and Legacy than in Standard, because we have a lot more cheaper spells that are efficient, and even some free spells that we play in this deck. And spinning out 1/1s each time casting a sorcery is going to be extremely powerful. So having a 2/1 so efficient is going to be very important.
Makes you wish you played Intentions in Modern.
Following into that same category is Snapcaster Mage. There's an argument for having 2 in the deck, but he's also mana intensive. We're not just like flashing back a Lightning Bolt, Serum Vision, Spiller, Flame, or Tactical Probe. Sometimes we'll get a counterspell, but getting to 4 lands, it's probably the most we want to have, and sometimes not even that, depending on our hand. But he is still so powerful and efficient, and we do want access to him. So there's 1 currently, maybe go up to 2 later. Not really sure. Then in the rest of our creatures is 3 Grim Lavamancers. Let's get a little closer. This is one of the older prints. Tap 1 red in it, remove 2 cards engraved from the game, and deal 2 units for creature player. It does not work extremely well with Grim Lavamancer. I mean, not Grim Lavamancer, with Snapcaster Mage. But we can also just keep things in our graveyard that we think we're going to want to flash back. Probably just like, Lightning Bolts, Electrolyzers, stuff like that. And we can just exile things we don't need. And he's still, once again, such an efficient creature. And at 1 mana, like other than Delver, there's not really that many creatures we want to play at 1 mana that I can even think of in Modern for this particular deck. So just having another 1-drop that's so powerful and efficient. But we do still only run 3, because running a 4th one, drawing 2 of them can be good sometimes if the game's gone long enough and we draw them later. But drawing 2 early is going to be really bad, because it'll just get to the point where they'll have to attack for 1 if you even want to try and get in damage with them. And that's not really what we do with our Grim Lavamancers. We have 1 Banefire. Just kind of I chose to main deck Banefire. Most people probably don't even play it in their 75, just because as the game goes late as it will against control deck, we need a way to finish them off that they can't stop, and this is the perfect way to do that. Control being, one of the worst matchups for the deck, because all of our early threats will be answered by their early removal if we don't have counterspell backup to protect it. And it's really hard to wait turns to play threats with counterspell backup, because we probably won't have enough counterspells in our main deck to protect them efficiently. So having a Banefire is going to be really nice to finish off the control decks. We have 2 Pillar Flame. It kills Kitchen Finks and Voice Resurgence. 2 huge problems for this deck, because most of our cards are going to be played on their turn. Our burn spells, our counter spells, our draw spells, a lot of them are just going to be played on their turn, and we really don't want to have to be playing at sorcery speed with all of our cards. And worst case scenario for this card, as I've said before, you can deal 2 damage to a player. So having something that's as flexible as that in our deck is good enough that we wanted having 2 in our 75. So I decided to main deck mine to just kind of play against like the Melira Pot decks and Green-White Hate Bears decks that play those cards. So that's why that's in here. We have 4 Serum Visions, just one of the cheapest efficient draw spells we can play. Works very well with Young Pyromancer and Delver and Grim Lavamancers, since it is 1 mana. Draw cards, cry 2 is still always good, even if we don't have any of those things in play, because it allows us to dig through our deck and fill through our draws, which is going to be very important for our deck, because we really don't want to draw more than 3 or 4 lands unless we have a Desolate Lighthouse in play. And even then, we still don't want maybe more than 5, like maybe 6 lands at that point. And that's getting ambitious with how many lands we want to play. So this is just going to help us filter our draws. We have 2 Taxing Probe. Our free spell in the deck, being able to pay 2 life to look at someone's hand and draw a card, is so good. It's really good on turn 1. It allows us to take, worse hands if we have, like, Serum Visions, Island, Probe. We can pretty much keep the hand just based off that, because we'll have 3 draws on our first turn. It also works really well with Young Pyromancer. Being able to go Young Pyromancer, pay 2 life, get a 1/1, and look at their hand and draw a card is going to be extremely powerful. And so that's why we're playing 2 of those cards. We have 4 Electrolyze. It's just so efficient at 3 mana, being able to deal 2 damage and draw a card. It can deal with a bunch of creatures in Modern, especially in, like, sometimes the mirror's going to happen, but a lot of decks have creatures with 1 toughness that you need to kill, even if it's just something with 2 toughness that you still need to kill. In worst case scenario, it gets to go to a player, and we still get to draw a card off it. So it's going to replace itself and deal damage, which is a huge deal, especially when we want all of our cards to be as efficient as possible to maximize our value of our spells. 4 Mana Leak, one of the best counter spells for this deck, being at 2 mana, only 1 blue mana, and coming down so early, it's going to counter a lot of things that we actually care about. Anger of the Gods, Path to Exile, Lightning Helix, Lightning Bolt, turn 4 Johnny's out of control decks. Just going to counter so many things so early. And once again, working so well with our threats as it is 2 mana, so cheap. Being able to play turn 1 Delver, untap, blind flip Delver, play land to keep up counterspells for the rest of the games, going to win a lot of games. We have 1 Remand, still very efficient, but I'd like to be able to hard counter people's spells, and I wanted all the rest of my spells to either act as reach or act as draw. So, like, I thought having 4 Mana Leaks would be enough, because Remand's not always a hard counter spell, which can be a really big problem where I'm playing, because a lot of things are like Lightning Bolt, Path to Exile, Lightning Helix, all these things that are so cheap that remanding it, especially after turn 2, is just not really going to do anything, because they can just recast it. So that's why I decided to have 4 Mana Leaks and 1 Remand. It still is efficient enough that it warranted having it in the 75. Maybe I should up the number, but I'm not really sure what I want to cut for the meta I'm expecting. So that's so we have 1 Remand. 4 Magma Jet, once again, works very well with Delver, Young Pyromancer. It still filters our draws and deals damage, so it's kind of like almost as good as Electrolyze, but it is 1 mana cheaper, which is very relevant. And it does allow us to keep worse hands. It acts as early removal against just some random creature decks that have, like Malira Pod, works really well against them. Still so efficient that it warranted having. And then the last of our spells is 2 Izzet Charm, 4 Lightning Bolt. Lightning Bolt's just kind of standard in the red decks of Modern. Izzet Charm, it's not too uncommon. Being able to, once again, counter early spells, it still draws cards, and it can remove creatures. Just so powerful and so efficient at 2 mana, like the rest of the spells in this deck. Then we have our mana base. We have 1 Desolate House, 1 Tectonic Edge as our colorless lands. If we start flooding Desolate House, it's really going to allow us to draw more cards and keep us in the game. Tectonic Edge answers Colonnades and other pesky lands, man lands. Can get Tron lands, just so flexible. We may want to up the number, but I'm not really sure, because blowing up our own lands can be hurtful, as we only do play 20, so we do have to be careful about using Tectonic Edge. And then we have the standard 4 Steam Vents, 4 Sulphur Falls. No fetches, but we do have plenty of islands and mountains to play around things like Blood Moon and such. Being a 2-color deck, we really didn't want to be able to lose to that, just because we're playing so many non-basic lands. So that's why there are so many basics. Maybe Mutavault should be added to the mana base. Probably should. It is still super efficient. Maybe cutting Tectonic Edge for Mutavault would be fine. But this is my deck as it is. I've done really well with it. Won an F&M. Done really well in playtesting. And just, I think this deck's really good right now. So I'd recommend playing it if you, especially like other than the Remand and even the Steam Vents, the deck's pretty relatively cheap to build. So if you just want to get into Modern with a good, quick, fast deck, this is probably a very good place to start, especially since it has so much game to it as the game goes on, which is kind of surprising from the look of it, having so many cheap spells. It has a lot of late game. And I will see you in a second for the sideboard. Come back for the sideboard of Blue Red Delver. We're going to go right into it. We have 1 Dungeon Geist, probably more because it's one of my favorite cards. I was around when Dark Censor was my first set. This was one of my favorite cards in that set, and I do feel like it's worth having access to. It does a very powerful thing, being able to keep a creature tapped against the Zoo decks. If they still have Path and Lightning Bolt, because they haven't used it on like our Delvers, Young Pyromancer, or Grim Lavamancer, then it can answer this. But the rare occasions where they haven't killed those with those cards, this isn't going to do anything anyway, other than tap down a blocker. But it can lock down Tarmogoyf and other other cards against Zoo decks. It can lock down Deceiver, Exarchs, and Pestermites against Splinter Twin decks, so they can't combo unless they kill it first, which you can always just leave Counterspell back up before to protect it. against, if you expect them to expect another blue-red deck to have Izzet Staticaster, it's a really good way to beat opposing Izzet Staticasters, because pretty much everything in our deck will just die to Izzet Staticaster, other than a Flip Delver. And though we can answer Izzet Staticaster, we don't really have a ton of ways to do that with just a 1-for-1 fashion, so we did want something that could keep it tapped down. We also are sideboarding our own 2 Izzet Staticasters, just the ability to tap and ping things. Very solid against tokens. If they don't have an Anthem in play, it kills them. Good against Hate Bears, good against other Delver decks if those are around. It's just a really solid, flexible card in Modern. It kills Mana Dorks also, which can be very relevant sometimes against like the Miller Pod decks where they're just Mana Dork, Gownie Township. This can kind of mess with those plans early anyway. And it does have 3 toughness, which also allows it to block really well against certain decks. So we did want that. We have 2 Molten Rain for the Tron matchup. We're pretty favored in that matchup, all of our spells being so cheap and efficient, and we're so fast anyway. We just kind of wanted a way to kill them even faster and put them behind a step. So just turn 1 Delver, turn 2 Young Pyromancer, turn 3 Molten Rain. They've probably lost the game from there. Short of like drawing an Explorer and a Tron land to replace the same Tron land to replace whatever Tron land we blew up. So it does put them quite far behind, especially in this deck when we want to get so far ahead so fast. We have 2 Counterflux, very good against Storm, being able to overload it, counter all the Storm copies that are on the stack. In the Control Mirror against, well, not Control Mirrors, against controlled decks, being able to just counter something and they can't do anything about it unless they're sideboarding Mind Break Trap, which isn't really that popular anymore, even though it used to be, then we're just going to get the final say on it and they can't do anything about it. We have 1 Negate, kind of just acting as another Mana Leak, just a hard counter at 2 mana, is going to counter a lot of things that we care about. Removal spells, Planeswalkers, Vidalcan Shackles, all these things are very important that we need to counter, and being at 2 mana, it's going to do those things. We have 2 Echoing Truth, very good against tokens. It's actually very good against the Boggles deck for us, because we can't really interact with their threats. We need to bounce their enchantments. Enchantments that'll kill us, enchantments that allow us to block with, like, a Young Pyromancer token, or just bouncing the Lifelink enchantment so we can kill them on the crackback is going to do a lot of things for us. As well as just being able to bounce things like Ley Lines of Sanctity, Vidalcan Shackles. Like if they try to Splinter Twin a Deceiver Exarch or Pestermite, we get to unsummon it on the spot. It's just so useful and flexible, especially in a deck where we want to be pushing through damage. Just allows us to do that, as well as being versatile. So very cheap and efficient, as we want all of the cards, as I've said many times, to be in our deck. We have 2 Spell Pierce, 1 mana, a mini Mana Leak. It's very good against, decks with cheap removal spells. Being able to just hold up 1 blue, it gets around Spell Snare, which is very easy for control players to hold up. So just having something that a Spell Snare can't counter, if that was the removal spell they were relying on, then it's going to be very good. As well as just being good against like burn decks, the Boggles decks, just good against so many random cards in Modern that actually see play. 2 Dispel, pretty much just for the blue or red matchup. It can come in against the burn deck, though it probably doesn't need to. Being able to counter instants, counters Path to Exiles, Lightning Bolts, Spell Snares, Mana Leaks, Remits, just all these things that are problems for us. So having another 1 blue mana costing spell that will just answer those is going to be very efficient. We also have run Relic of Progenitus. Just, there are graveyard decks in Modern. We do have to be able to interact with them, but we do kind of rely heavily on our graveyard with 3 Grim Lavamancers and a Snapcaster Mage in our deck. We really want to have a graveyard too, but sometimes we will have to exile a graveyard, but we do want to have something that on turn 1, if we play it, we're pretty much just going to shut them out of doing anything with their graveyard that's too silly. So just a very powerful card to have in our sideboard. Maybe the Dungeon Guy should come out for another Relic, but I'm not really sure. It's not too great in my meta, but I did want to have it in case someone decides to start trying something like Living End, or maybe some kind of Reanimator deck or Life from the Loam deck. We really needed a way to stop that from happening. So there's our sideboard. The next time I bring a Delver deck, it will hopefully be a Grixis Delver deck, as I want to work with that. I feel like being able to go Delver, Young Pyromancer, Thoughtseize Away, like Anger of the Gods, or removal spells, is going to be really powerful. So I just kind of want to test that and see if that works. Hopefully, I can do that quickly. Just kind of need to get hold of some cards for it. And I hope to bring that guys to you pretty soon. And I hope you guys enjoyed this Modern Deck Tech, and will enjoy the Monoverse videos that go with it. So please, guys, check out our blog. It's up on mtgbrodeals.com now. It's still probably going to get posted on pearsallsblog.wordpress.com. We have a Twitter at pearsallsblog and an email, pearsallsblog@yahoo.com. Please check all of those things out, and don't be afraid to talk to us. We are more than willing to talk back. Bye, guys. Have a great day.